Daniel Carter stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring out into the endless void of space. The stars twinkled faintly in the distance, their light taking years to reach his eyes. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the mission pressing down on him. This was no ordinary assignment. It wasn't just about representing Earth or negotiating trade agreements. This time, it was about survival. Humanity's place in the galaxy depended on the outcome of these talks. Beside him, Lisa, Monroe adjusted her uniform and glanced nervously at her datapad. She had spent hours reviewing every detail of the Galactic Empire's political structure, their leaders and their customs. Yet none of that preparation could calm her nerves. Something about this meeting felt off, like a storm brewing on the horizon. "Are you ready?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied with a small smile. His tone was calm, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the railing. He turned away from the window and straightened his jacket, trying to project confidence even though doubt gnawed at him. "Let's go." The two diplomats walked through the sleek corridors of the SS Solace, their footsteps echoing against the metallic walls. The ship was one of Earth's finest vessels, designed not for war, but for diplomacy. Its smooth curves and polished surfaces made it look more like an ambassador's yacht than a spacecraft capable of crossing light years. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. When they arrived at the airlock, the crew saluted them before sealing the hatch behind them. A shuttle awaited outside, its engines glowing faintly as it hovered near the larger vessel. Through the viewport, Daniel caught sight of the Imperial outpost looming ahead, a massive structure of steel and glass floating amidst a sea of stars. It looked cold and impersonal, much like the Empire itself. As the shuttle docked, Daniel and Lisa exchanged glances. They both knew what was at stake. For years, humanity had been expanding outward into uncharted territories, only to clash with the Galactic Empire over disputed regions. Both sides claimed ownership of valuable resources scattered across those sectors: minerals, energy reserves, and habitable planets. Diplomatic efforts had failed repeatedly, leaving tensions simmering just below the surface. Now Earth's leaders hoped that Daniel and Lisa could broker a lasting peace before things spiraled out of control. Stepping onto the outpost, they were greeted by a squad of armored guards armed with energy rifles. Their expressions were unreadable, behind mirrored visors giving nothing away. At the head of the group stood Lord Valen, the Empire's appointed representative. Tall and imposing, he wore robes adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered under the artificial lights. His sharp features and piercing gaze gave him an air of authority that demanded respect, or fear. "Welcome," Valen said, his voice low and measured. There was no warmth in his greeting, only a calculated politeness. "You honor us with your presence." "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Daniel responded, bowing slightly. "We come in good faith, hoping to resolve our differences peacefully." Valen nodded but said nothing. Instead, he gestured for them to follow him deeper into the outpost. The hallways were dimly lit, casting long shadows along the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic clanking of boots against the metal floor. Daniel noticed how the guards kept close watch on them, their weapons always within reach. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but he pushed the thought aside. They had come too far to turn back now. Finally, they reached the conference chamber. The room was large and circular, dominated by a long table surrounded by chairs. Holographic displays flickered above the surface, showing maps of contested territories and resource distribution charts. Valen took his seat at the head of the table while Daniel and Lisa settled across from him. The guards remained stationed around the perimeter, their presence making the atmosphere even tenser. For the next hour, Daniel did his best to engage Valen in meaningful dialogue. He spoke passionately about mutual cooperation, emphasizing the benefits of shared prosperity. Lisa chimed in occasionally, offering statistics and proposals backed by careful research. But Valen listened with detached indifference, rarely contributing to the conversation. His responses were curt and dismissive, often steering the discussion toward trivial matters. Lisa leaned closer to Daniel and whispered, "This isn't working. He's stalling." "I know," Daniel muttered under his breath. "But we don't have a choice. We need to keep trying." Just as Daniel was about to propose another angle, the doors burst open. A dozen additional guards stormed into the room, their weapons trained on the humans. Before Daniel or Lisa could react, they were seized roughly by the arms and dragged to their feet. "What is the meaning of this?" Daniel demanded, struggling against the grip of his captors. "We're here under diplomatic immunity." Vaylon rose slowly from his chair, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Diplomatic immunity does not apply to spies," he declared. "You have been found guilty of espionage against the Galactic Empire. Your actions will not go unpunished." "This is absurd," Lisa exclaimed, her voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "We've done nothing wrong." Vaylon ignored her protests, waving a hand to signal the guards to remove them. As they were hauled out of the chamber, Daniel locked eyes with Lisa. Despite the chaos, there was a silent understanding between them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Back aboard the SS Solace, Captain Ryan Fields paced anxiously in the command center. Hours had passed since the diplomats entered the outpost, and there had been no word from them. Communication channels remained eerily silent, despite repeated attempts to establish contact. "Something's wrong," he muttered to himself, rubbing his temples. "They should have checked in by now." His concerns deepened when a garbled transmission finally came through. Static crackled over the speakers, followed by fragments of distorted voices. "Captured, accused, espionage," were the only words Ryan could make out before the signal cut off entirely. Ryan immediately relayed the information to Earth Command. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. The disappearance of Daniel Carter and Lisa Monroe sent shockwaves throughout the United Planetary Alliance. Protests erupted in cities across the globe, with citizens demanding answers and justice. President Laura Hayes convened an emergency session of the Global Assembly, addressing the public in a televised broadcast. "Our representatives have been taken hostage under false pretenses," she announced, her expression grim. "This act of aggression cannot and will not be tolerated. We call upon the Galactic Empire to release them immediately and provide assurances of their safety. Failure to do so will have severe consequences." Behind closed doors, military leaders began drafting contingency plans. Admiral Robert Kane, commander of Earth's fleet, argued for swift retaliation. "If they think they can intimidate us, they're mistaken," he growled during a strategy meeting. "We need to show them that humanity won't back down." Meanwhile, aboard the Imperial cruiser where Daniel and Lisa were being held, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were placed in separate cells, isolated from each other and stripped of all communication devices. The walls were bare except for a single flickering light overhead, casting eerie shadows across the floor. Daniel sat cross-legged on the hard bench, replaying the events of the day in his mind. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? In the adjacent cell, Lisa fought back tears as she tried to process their predicament. She had always known the risks of diplomatic work, but this went beyond anything she'd imagined. The Empire's accusations of espionage were baseless, yet they seemed determined to use them as justification for hostility. What would happen if Earth didn't receive proof of their capture? Would anyone even realize they were missing until it was too late? Despite the despair creeping in, Lisa refused to give up. She studied her surroundings carefully, searching for any weakness in the cell's design. Maybe there was a way to escape, or at least send a message back to Earth. She wasn't sure how yet, but she vowed to find a solution. After all, humanity's future might depend on it. As the hours dragged on, Daniel found himself thinking about home. He pictured the rolling hills of his childhood farm, the laughter of friends and family gathered around a dinner table. Those memories felt impossibly distant now, like echoes from another life, but they also reminded him why he had chosen this path, to to protect the people he loved and ensure a better future for everyone. Somewhere in the depths of the Imperial cruiser, hope still burned, however faintly. And as long as it did, Daniel and Lisa would fight to keep it alive. The metallic walls of the cell felt cold against Daniel Carter's back as he leaned against them, trying to process everything that had happened. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the cruiser's engines vibrating. Through the floor, his mind raced with questions. Why had they been accused of espionage? Who stood to gain from framing them? And most importantly, how could they possibly escape? In the neighboring cell, Lisa Monroe sat hunched over, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She stared at the floor, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic storm. She replayed every moment of their capture in her head, searching for clues or mistakes they might have made. But nothing added up. They had followed protocol, said all the right things, and acted with complete transparency. Yet here they were, imprisoned, isolated, and labeled as criminals. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching into what felt like hours. Meals came infrequently. Bland rations slid through a narrow slot in the door, barely enough to keep them alive. The guards rarely spoke, their faces obscured by helmets that reflected the dim light. When they did interact, it was with sharp commands or dismissive gestures. There was no humanity in their actions, only cold efficiency. Despite the grim circumstances, Lisa refused to let despair take hold. She spent her days observing every detail of her surroundings, cataloging patterns in the guards' movements, and memorizing the layout of the corridor outside her cell. She noticed that the same guard always brought food at roughly the same time each day. She counted the number of steps it took for him to reach her door and return to his post. She even paid attention to the faint creaks and groans of the ship's structure, hoping to identify weak points she could exploit. One day, after what felt like weeks, Lisa heard a soft tapping sound coming from the wall behind her. At first, she thought it was just another quirk of the aging cruiser, but then the pattern repeated itself, a series of short taps followed by two longer ones. Morse code. Her heart leapt with hope. Someone was trying to communicate. She tapped back cautiously, mimicking the rhythm she had heard. The response came quickly this time, more deliberate and confident. It wasn't Daniel. His cell was on the other side of hers. This message was coming from someone else entirely, a prisoner in an adjacent cell. Over the next few hours, Lisa exchanged coded messages with her mysterious neighbor. His name was Arik, a former engineer who had once worked for the Empire before being arrested for speaking out against its policies. He explained that he had been imprisoned for months, long enough to learn the ins and outs of the cruiser's systems. Though he couldn't see her, his voice carried a sense of determination through the thin metal barrier. "We can get out of here," Arik whispered, his words barely audible, "but we'll need to work together." Lisa nodded even though he couldn't see her. "Tell me what to do," she replied softly. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to maintain his composure. The isolation was wearing him down, chipping away at his resolve. He tried to stay focused, running through potential scenarios in his mind and rehearsing arguments he might use if given the chance to speak to Lord Valen again. But the monotony of captivity gnawed at him, making it harder to think clearly. Then one evening, something changed. A guard entered Daniel's cell without warning, dragging him to his feet. For a moment, Daniel feared the worst, that he was being taken to some sort of interrogation chamber. Instead, he was led to a small room where Lisa waited, her face lighting up with relief when she saw him. "They're letting us talk," Lisa whispered urgently as soon as the door closed behind them. "But I don't know why." Daniel frowned, glancing warily at the cameras mounted in the corners of the room. "Be careful," he murmured. "They're probably recording everything." Lisa nodded, lowering her voice further. "I've been talking to someone else, a prisoner named Arik. He says there's a way out of here, but we'll need to act fast." Daniel listened intently as Lisa explained Arik's plan. It involved sabotaging the cruiser's power core, creating enough chaos to distract the guards while they made their escape. It was risky, almost suicidal, But Daniel knew they didn't have many options left. If we pull this off, we might be able to send a message back to Earth, Lisa added, her eyes shining with determination. We need to prove our innocence and warn them about the Empire's plans. Daniel hesitated, weighing the risks. Failure would mean certain death, or worse. But staying in their cells meant waiting for a rescue that might never come. Finally, he nodded. Let's do it. Back in their cells, they began preparing for the operation. Using scraps of metal and tools smuggled to them by Auric, they fashioned crude devices designed to overload the power conduits near the core. Lisa coordinated, with Auric through the walls, timing their actions to coincide with shifts in the guard rotations. Every detail mattered. One wrong move could ruin everything. On the day of the escape, tension hung thick in the air. Daniel and Lisa exchanged nervous glances as they waited for the signal. When the tapping finally came, a series of 3 quick bursts, they sprang into action. Lisa slipped the makeshift device through the slot in her cell door, positioning it carefully near the exposed wiring in the hallway. Daniel did the same on his side, his hands trembling as he worked. As soon as both devices were in place, Auric triggered the overload remotely. The effect was immediate and devastating. Alarms blared throughout the cruiser as sparks erupted from the walls, plunging sections of the ship into darkness. Guards scrambled to contain the chaos, shouting orders and rushing toward the source of the disturbance. In the confusion, Daniel and Lisa broke free from their cells, meeting up in the corridor. Now! Lisa shouted, grabbing Daniel's hand, as they sprinted toward the nearest shuttle bay. Behind them, explosions rocked the ship, sending debris flying in all directions. The power core was destabilizing faster than expected, giving them only minutes to get clear. Auric joined them moments later, his face streaked with soot but his expression resolute. Together, the trio fought their way past stunned guards, using stolen weapons to fend off anyone who tried to stop them. The shuttle bay loomed ahead, its doors partially open and beckoning like a lifeline. As they climbed aboard a small transport shuttle, Daniel took the controls while Lisa and Auric manned the turrets. The engines roared to life just as the first wave of Imperial fighters appeared on the horizon. Laser blasts lit up the void of space as the shuttle shot forward, narrowly avoiding collisions with larger ships. Behind them, the cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its power core finally giving out. The shockwave sent tremors through the surrounding vessels, forcing the Imperial fleet to retreat momentarily. Daniel guided the shuttle toward a nearby neutral station, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. When they finally docked, exhaustion overwhelmed them. Lisa collapsed into a seat, tears streaming down her face as reality set in. They had made it, but at what cost? The Empire would surely retaliate, blaming Earth for the destruction of one of their cruisers. And worse, they still had no proof of their innocence. Auric placed a reassuring hand on Lisa's shoulder. You did what you had to do, he said, quietly. Now it's up to your people to decide what comes next. Daniel stared out the viewport at the distant stars, his jaw clenched with determination. We'll make them listen, he vowed, no matter what it takes. For now they were safe, but the galaxy was vast, and the Empire's reach extended far beyond this outpost. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but Daniel and Lisa knew one thing for certain. Humanity's fight was far from over. The neutral station where Daniel, Lisa, and Auric found refuge was a sprawling hub of activity. Ships of all shapes and sizes docked at its ports, their crews mingling in the bustling corridors. The air buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages, the clinking of tools and the hum of machinery. For a moment it felt almost normal, like they had stepped into a place untouched by the chaos of the Empire or the looming threat of war. But the weight of what they had just endured, and what lay ahead, was impossible to ignore. Daniel leaned against the railing of the observation deck, staring out at the stars. His mind raced with questions. How could they prove their innocence? What would happen when the Empire retaliated for the destruction of one of its cruisers? And most importantly, how could they warn Earth about the Empire's true intentions? He clenched his fists, frustration building inside him. They had escaped captivity, but they were still far from safe. Lisa sat nearby, her eyes fixed on the floor. She hadn't spoken much since their arrival, her thoughts consumed by guilt and fear. Despite their narrow escape, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, something vital. "We should have gotten more information," she muttered, finally breaking the silence. "Something to show Earth that we weren't lying." Daniel turned to look at her, his expression softening. "We did everything we could," he said, gently. "Right now we need to focus on getting back and telling them what we know." Arik stood a few steps away, listening quietly. Though he had risked everything to help them escape, he wasn't entirely sure why he had done it. Maybe it was because he saw a spark of hope in these two humans, a chance to fight back against the empire that had taken so much from him. Or maybe it was simply the thrill of rebellion after months of imprisonment. Either way, he knew their journey was far from over. "We'll figure it out," Arik said, stepping closer. "But first we need to get off this station before the Empire tracks us down." He was right. The Empire wouldn't let them slip away so easily. Even here, in neutral territory, they weren't truly safe. Imperial agents could already be searching for them, combing through records and questioning dock workers. Every second they stayed put them at greater risk. With that in mind, the trio set to work. They scavenged parts from abandoned ships in the station's repair bay, piecing together a makeshift transmitter capable of sending a message across vast distances. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. As Lisa programmed the coordinates for Earth, Daniel recorded a brief transmission, summarizing their ordeal and urging humanity to prepare for the Empire's aggression. "This is Daniel Carter," he began, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "If you're hearing this, it means we made it out alive, but barely. The Empire has accused us of espionage and refuses to negotiate. They're planning something big, something dangerous. We don't have all the details yet, but trust me, they're coming for us. Humanity needs to be ready." When the message was complete, Lisa activated the transmitter, sending it hurtling into the void of space. There was no guarantee it would reach Earth, or that anyone would believe them if it did. But it was the best they could do under the circumstances. Afterward, they boarded a small freighter they had bartered for using credits Arik had stashed during his time as an engineer. It wasn't fast or well-armed, but it would get them moving again. As the freighter pulled away from the station, Daniel took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Behind them, the stars stretched endlessly, beautiful yet indifferent. Somewhere, out there, Earth waited, unaware of the storm heading its way. He hoped their warning would arrive in time. Back on Earth, the situation was growing increasingly tense. News of Daniel and Lisa's capture had spread like wildfire, sparking outrage across the planet. Protests erupted in cities worldwide, with citizens demanding justice for their captured diplomats. Screens in public squares displayed grainy footage of the Imperial outpost, accompanied by headlines screaming accusations of betrayal and treachery. President Laura Hayes addressed the nation from the Global Assembly Hall, her face grim as she spoke. "The Galactic Empire has shown its true colors," she declared, her voice firm. "They have violated every principle of diplomacy and decency. If they think they can intimidate us, they are gravely mistaken. Earth will not stand idly by while our people are held hostage." Her words ignited a firestorm of support. Military leaders convened emergency meetings, strategizing how best to respond to the Empire's aggression. Admiral Robert Kane, commander of Earth's fleet, argued for immediate action. "We can't wait around hoping they'll release our people," he growled during a heated session. "We strike first, hit them hard, and send a message they won't forget." Others urged caution, warning that hasty retaliation could escalate into full-blown war. But the tide of public opinion was shifting. People wanted answers, and revenge. The Empire's refusal to acknowledge responsibility only fueled suspicions that they were hiding something sinister. Then, days later, the intercepted transmissions arrived. Intelligence operatives monitoring Imperial communications stumbled upon encrypted messages detailing plans for a massive assault on Earth's core systems. The Empire wasn't just flexing its muscles, it was preparing for invasion. When decoded, the data revealed chilling specifics, troop movements, target lists, and resource extraction schedules. President Hayes called another assembly, this time with military commanders and top scientists in attendance. "This isn't just about Daniel and Lisa anymore," she said, slamming her fist on the table. "This is about survival. The Empire wants to wipe us out and take what's ours. We need to stop them before it's too late." Admiral Kane seized the opportunity, presenting a bold plan codenamed Operation Reckoning. It involved launching simultaneous strikes on key Imperial strongholds, crippling their ability to wage war effectively. To pull it off, Earth would need to mobilize every available ship, weapon, and soldier. Factories shifted into overdrive, churning out advanced fighters and warships equipped with cutting-edge technology. Colonies across the galaxy rallied to contribute resources and personnel, united by a shared sense of purpose. Among those joining the effort was Captain Ryan Fields, commander of the SS Solace. Though devastated by the loss of his crewmates, he vowed to honor their memory by leading the charge against the Empire. "We owe it to them," he told his team as they prepared for battle. "And we owe it to everyone back home who's counting on us to protect them." As fleets assembled and strategies solidified, ordinary citizens pitched in however they could. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons and defenses. Engineers modified civilian vessels for combat, turning harmless cargo ships into formidable war machines. Families rationed supplies, sacrificing comfort for the greater good. Posters plastered on walls proclaimed slogans like "Stand Together" and "For Freedom for Earth." Amid the chaos, stories of heroism emerged. A young pilot named Elena Ruiz volunteered for a dangerous reconnaissance mission, risking her life to gather intel on Imperial positions. An elderly engineer named Harold Jenkins designed a revolutionary shield system that could deflect enemy fire, giving Earth ships a critical edge in battle. Even children contributed, writing letters of encouragement to soldiers and organizing fundraisers to support the war effort. Despite the unity, fear lingered beneath the surface. Rumors spread of sleeper agents lurking among Earth's population, saboteurs planted by the Empire to destabilize humanity from within. Security measures tightened and paranoia grew. Neighbors eyed each other suspiciously, wondering who might be a traitor. Yet even in the darkest moments, hope persisted. People clung to the belief that humanity's strength lay in its diversity and resilience, that together they could overcome any obstacle. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Daniel, Lisa, and Arik continued their journey toward Earth. They traveled cautiously, avoiding major trade routes and sticking to less traveled paths. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to home, but also deeper into uncertainty. Would Earth believe their story? Would their warning arrive in time to prevent disaster? One night, as the freighter drifted silently through the void, Lisa gazed out the viewport at the endless sea of stars. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with doubt. Daniel glanced at her, then at Arik, who was tinkering with the ship's engine controls. "We have to," he replied firmly. "If we don't, who will?" Arik nodded without looking up. "Humanity's counting on us," he added, "and I'm starting to see why you're worth fighting for." Their resolve hardened as they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that the fate of billions rested on their shoulders. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but they had no choice but to keep moving. Earth needed them, and they wouldn't let it down. Somewhere in the distance, the first shots of humanity's war with the Galactic Empire were being fired. The freighter carrying Daniel, Lisa, and Arik limped through space, its engines groaning under the strain of constant use. They had been traveling for days, avoiding Imperial patrols and scavenging fuel from derelict ships along the way. The journey was taking longer than they had hoped, but they couldn't afford to take shortcuts. Every decision they made carried the weight of potential disaster. One wrong move, one careless jump into hyperspace, and they could end up in the hands of the Empire or worse. Inside the cramped cockpit, tension hung thick in the air. Lisa sat hunched over a console, scanning for any signs of Imperial activity on their current trajectory. Her fingers flew across the controls, her eyes darting between screens filled with data streams and sensor readings. "We're clear for now," she said finally, letting out a shaky breath. "But we can't stay on this course for much longer. They'll catch up eventually." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight with frustration. He had spent hours poring over star charts trying to find a route that would keep them hidden while still leading them closer to Earth. But every option felt like a gamble. "We'll have to risk it," he said quietly. "If we don't make a break for it soon, we'll run out of supplies before we even get close." Auric leaned back against the wall, his arms crossed as he watched the two humans debate. For someone who had spent months locked in a cell, he seemed surprisingly calm, almost unnervingly so. "You've got guts," he said after a moment, breaking the silence. "I'll give you that, but guts alone won't save you. You need a plan." "We have a plan," Lisa snapped, turning to glare at him. "It's not perfect, but it's all we've got." "Fair enough," Auric replied with a shrug. "Just remember, if things go sideways, don't blame me." His nonchalance grated on her nerves, but Lisa forced herself to take a deep breath. Arguing wouldn't help anyone. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, plotting their next series of jumps carefully. Each calculation brought them closer to home, and closer to the unknown dangers waiting for them there. Meanwhile, on Earth, the first wave of humanity's counterattack was already underway. Operation Reckoning had begun with a series of precision strikes against key Imperial outposts scattered across contested territories. Earth's fleet moved swiftly and silently, catching the Empire off guard. Ships emerged from hyperspace without warning, unleashing devastating barrages of missiles and energy weapons before vanishing again into the void. Captain Ryan Fields led one such assault, commanding a squadron of modified fighters tasked with disabling an Imperial supply depot. The mission was risky. The depot was heavily defended, its perimeter patrolled by squadrons of elite pilots. But Ryan knew the stakes. If they succeeded, they would cripple the Empire's ability to sustain its forces in the region. As his ship approached the target, Ryan gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white. "All units, prepare for attack," he said into the comm system, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stay sharp. We only get one shot at this." The squadron broke formation, spreading out to flank the enemy defenses. Laser blasts lit up the darkness as Imperial fighters scrambled to intercept them. Explosions erupted in flashes of light, sending debris spiraling through space. Ryan's ship shuddered under the impact of incoming fire, but he held his ground, guiding his team toward their objective. "Target acquired," one of his pilots reported, locking onto the depot's main reactor. "Firing now." A volley of torpedoes streaked toward the structure, striking with pinpoint accuracy. The reactor exploded in a brilliant flash, engulfing the surrounding area in flames. Cheers erupted over the comm channel as the squadron regrouped and prepared to withdraw. They had done it, but the victory came at a cost. 3 ships were lost in the engagement, their crews sacrificed for the greater good. Admiral Robert Kane monitored the operation from the bridge of Earth's flagship, the SS Vanguard. His expression remained stoic as reports poured in from across the battlefield. Successes were celebrated briefly, failures analyzed ruthlessly. There was no room for sentimentality in war. Every decision mattered, every action counted. The Empire will retaliate, Kane muttered to himself, staring at the tactical display. "They'll hit us harder next time." Beside him, Lieutenant Sophia Grant adjusted the holographic map, highlighting areas where Imperial reinforcements were likely to converge. She had joined the military straight out of university, driven by a desire to protect her family and friends. Now, as one of Kane's top strategists, she carried the weight of countless lives on her shoulders. "We need to anticipate their moves," she said firmly. "If we can predict where they'll strike, we can be ready." Kane nodded, impressed by her determination. "Do it," he ordered. "And fast. We don't have much time." Sophia got to work immediately, running simulations and cross-referencing intelligence reports. Her efforts paid off when she identified a pattern in the Empire's movements, a weak point in their defensive line that could be exploited. With Kane's approval, she relayed the information to the fleet, setting the stage for another round of attacks. Back on Earth, civilians followed the progress of the war with bated breath. News broadcasts provided updates on battles won and lost, casualties suffered, and heroes made. Families gathered around screens praying for loved ones serving in the military. Children drew pictures of spaceships and soldiers, their imaginations fueled by stories of bravery and sacrifice. In schools, teachers paused lessons to discuss the conflict, encouraging students to think critically about the causes and consequences of war. "Why are we fighting?" one teacher asked her class during a history lesson. "What do we stand to gain or lose?" The question sparked heated debates among the students, some arguing passionately for peace while others insisted that humanity had no choice but to defend itself. Amid the chaos, a sense of unity emerged. People realized that their differences, whether cultural, political, or personal, paled in comparison to the threat posed by the Empire. Together, they formed a single front, bound by a shared purpose. For President Laura Hayes, the war represented both a challenge and an opportunity. She toured military bases, hospitals, and factories, speaking directly to the people doing the hard work of keeping humanity alive. Her speeches were simple yet powerful, focusing on themes of resilience and hope. "This isn't just about winning battles," she told a crowd of workers assembling warships. "It's about proving to the galaxy and to ourselves that we won't back down, that we'll fight for what's right no matter the odds." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring millions to push harder, work faster, and dream bigger. Even those who disagreed with her policies found themselves moved by her conviction. In times of crisis, leadership mattered, and Laura Hayes was determined to lead by example. As Daniel, Lisa, and Arik continued their journey, they began picking up fragments of intercepted transmissions detailing Earth's early successes. At first, the news brought relief. Humanity was holding its own against the Empire, proving that it wasn't as helpless as the Empire had assumed. But as more reports came in, the reality of the situation became clearer. The war was far from over, and the cost of victory was mounting rapidly. "They're losing ships," Lisa said softly, listening to a garbled message about a recent battle. "Good people are dying." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "We knew it wouldn't be easy," he reminded her, "but every life lost brings us closer to ending this." Arik watched them silently, his expression unreadable. He had seen wars before, fought in battles that left scars deeper than any weapon could inflict. He understood the toll it took, not just on individuals, but on entire societies. Yet he also knew that sometimes war was unavoidable. Sometimes it was necessary. "We'll get there," he said finally, breaking the silence. "And when we do, maybe we can actually make a difference." Lisa looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For the first time since they met, she saw glimpses of the man he used to be, the engineer who once believed in building bridges instead of blowing them up. Perhaps, she thought, there was still hope for all of them. With renewed determination, the trio plotted their final approach to Earth. Ahead of them lay uncertainty and danger, but also the promise of redemption. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The freighter carrying Daniel, Lisa, and Arik finally entered Earth's solar system after weeks of harrowing travel. The sight of the pale blue dot hanging in the vastness of space filled them with a mix of relief and dread. They had made it back, but what awaited them? Would their warning be believed? Would they arrive too late to prevent further bloodshed? As they approached, Lisa monitored the communications channels, her heart sinking as she listened to fragmented reports from the front lines. Earth's fleet was holding its ground, but the cost was staggering. Entire squadrons had been wiped out in brutal engagements. Colonies on the outer rim were under siege, their defenses crumbling under relentless imperial assaults. The war was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. "We need to get this information to someone who can act on it," Daniel said, his voice firm despite the exhaustion etched into his face. Every second counts. Arik adjusted the ship's trajectory, guiding it toward a hidden orbital station near Earth's moon. It was a risky move. The Empire's spies could be watching, and any misstep might expose their position. But they couldn't risk landing directly on Earth either. Too many eyes, too many questions. For now, the station would have to suffice. When they docked, a team of technicians greeted them cautiously. Word of their escape had spread, but skepticism lingered. Who were these strangers claiming to carry vital intelligence? Could they be Imperial agents attempting to sow discord? Daniel stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We're not your enemy," he said calmly. "We're here to help. Listen to us." Reluctantly, the technicians allowed them access to the station's secure communication hub. There, Daniel and Lisa uploaded the data they had gathered during their captivity, the intercepted transmissions detailing the Empire's invasion plans, troop movements, and resource extraction schedules. Every byte of information was precious, a potential lifeline for humanity's survival. Lisa worked quickly, encrypting the files and tagging them for priority delivery to Earth Command. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. This wasn't just about clearing their names anymore. It was about giving humanity a fighting chance against an overwhelming foe. Once the upload was complete, they sent a direct message to Admiral Robert Kane, explaining who they were and what they had uncovered. "This is Daniel Carter," he began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We've escaped from Imperial custody and retrieved critical intel. Use this to stop them before it's too late." With nothing left to do but wait, the trio settled into the station's sparse living quarters. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they waited for a response. Hours passed, then days. The tension was unbearable. Had their message reached Earth Command? Were they being ignored, or worse, dismissed as liars? Finally, a reply came. A small shuttle arrived at the station, bearing the insignia of Earth's military. Out stepped Captain Ryan Fields, his expression unreadable as he entered the room, where Daniel, Lisa, and Arik waited. For a moment no one spoke. Then Ryan extended his hand. "You're telling the truth," he said simply. "And we need your help." Back on Earth, Admiral Kane reviewed the data provided by Daniel and Lisa. At first glance, it seemed too damning to be real, an elaborate trap set by the Empire to lure humanity into making a fatal mistake. But as his analysts pored over the details, patterns emerged that matched other pieces of intelligence they had collected independently. The invasion plans were authentic, and they painted a grim picture of the Empire's intentions. "They're targeting our core systems," Kane muttered, pacing the command center of the SS Vanguard. "If they succeed, it's game over." "Lieutenant," Sophia Grant nodded grimly, her fingers flying across the holographic display. She highlighted key locations marked for attack: Earth's largest colonies, industrial hubs, and agricultural centers. "They're going for maximum damage," she said. "Not just militarily, but economically and socially." Kane clenched, his fists, his mind racing through options. Humanity's forces were stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts to hold back the Empire's advances. Reinforcements were en route, but they wouldn't arrive in time to stop the next wave of attacks. If they didn't act decisively and soon, they would lose everything. "We hit them where it hurts," Kane declared, turning to face his officers. "Their flagship. Without it, their coordination falls apart. We take it out and we buy ourselves some breathing room." The plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. The Empire's flagship, the Eternal Sovereign, was a behemoth of a vessel, bristling with weapons and protected by layers of shields. Attacking it head-on would be suicide. But Kane had never been one to shy away from impossible odds. "Gather every available ship," he ordered. "Divert resources if you have to. We're ending this now." The fleet assembled rapidly, drawing ships from across Earth's defensive network. Fighters, bombers, and cruisers converged on a staging area near the front lines, their crews preparing for what might be their final mission. Among them was Captain Ryan Fields, reunited with the SS Solace and determined to honor the memory of those lost in earlier battles. Daniel and Lisa joined the effort, volunteering their expertise to aid in the assault. Though neither had formal, military training, their first-hand knowledge of the Empire's tactics proved invaluable. They studied maps, analyzed patrol routes, and suggested strategies to exploit weaknesses in the Empire's defenses. Auric, meanwhile, worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, modifying ships' engines for greater speed and efficiency. As the fleet prepared to launch, President Laura Hayes addressed the crew via live broadcast. Her voice carried strength and resolve, cutting through the fear and uncertainty gripping everyone involved. "Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of humanity," she said. "The Empire seeks to destroy us, to erase everything we've built. But they underestimate who we are. We will not falter. We will not yield. Together we will prevail." Her words ignited a fire within the ranks. Soldiers checked their weapons one last time, pilots ran pre-flight checks, and engineers made final adjustments to their vessels. Families sent messages of love and encouragement, knowing full well that many might never return. Yet even in the face of death there was hope, a belief that their sacrifice would mean something. The battle began with Earth's fleet emerging from hyperspace directly above the Eternal Sovereign. The element of surprise gave them a fleeting advantage, catching the Empire off guard. Ships swarmed the flagship, unleashing torrents of fire that overwhelmed its shields. Explosions lit up the void as fighters darted between larger vessels, dodging enemy fire while delivering crippling blows. Captain Ryan Fields led a squadron of bombers straight toward the flagship's main reactor. His ship shuddered violently as lasers grazed its hull, alarms blaring in the cockpit. "Stay focused," he shouted to his crew. "We're almost there." Behind him, Daniel and Lisa coordinated with the fleet's command center, relaying real-time updates and adjusting strategies on the fly. Their calm demeanor masked the terror coursing through their veins. One wrong calculation, one missed opportunity, and the entire operation would collapse. Auric manned a repair drone, patching up damaged ships mid-battle. He worked with precision and speed, his hands moving instinctively as he patched breaches and restored power to failing systems. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't stop. Not until the job was done. Amid the chaos, Admiral Kane orchestrated the assault from the bridge of the SS Vanguard. His eyes scanned the tactical display, tracking every movement, every shot, fired. "Push forward," he barked into the comm system. "Don't let them regroup." Slowly but surely the tide began to turn. The Eternal Sovereign's defenses crumbled under the relentless barrage, its once mighty shields reduced to flickering remnants. A daring strike by Ryan's squadron breached the reactor core, triggering a chain reaction that engulfed the flagship in flames. The explosion was massive, sending shockwaves through the surrounding fleet. Cheers erupted across the battlefield as the Empire's forces retreated, leaderless and disorganized. Humanity had won, for now, but the victory came at a terrible price. Dozens of ships lay in ruins, their crews lost forever. Survivors limped back to Earth, battered but alive. As the dust settled, Daniel and Lisa stood together on the observation deck of the SS Solace, watching the stars twinkle faintly in the distance. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but so did pride. They had played a part in humanity's triumph, however small, and yet they knew the war was far from over. "This isn't the end," Lisa said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "No," Daniel agreed, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But it's a start. Somewhere, in the depths of space, the Empire regrouped, licking its wounds and plotting revenge. The galaxy remained a dangerous place, but humanity had proven it wouldn't go quietly into the night. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The aftermath of the battle was a blur of activity. Earth's fleet returned to its scattered bases, limping home with damaged ships and weary crews. The victory over the Empire's flagship had been a turning point, but no one dared to call it an end. The war still simmered on the edges of humanity's territory, a constant threat that refused to fade. For Daniel, Lisa, and Arik, the days following the assault were filled with debriefings, strategy meetings, and endless questions. Admiral Robert Kane summoned them to the command center aboard the SS Vanguard, his expression grim despite the recent success. "We've dealt them a blow," he said, pacing in front of a holographic map of the galaxy. "But they're not done, not by a long shot." Daniel nodded, his eyes fixed on the glowing lines marking contested territories. "They'll regroup," he said quietly. "And when they do, they'll come at us harder." Kane stopped pacing and turned to face him. "That's why we need every advantage we can get. Your intel has already saved countless lives, but we need more. Anything you remember, anything at all, could make the difference." Lisa leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "There was something Lord Valen mentioned," she said slowly. "A central command hub. He called it the Nexus. It's where they coordinate their operations across the galaxy." Kane's eyes narrowed. "The Nexus," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "If we could take that out, it would cripple their ability to wage war," Daniel finished for him. "But getting to it won't be easy. It's deep in Imperial space, heavily defended." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Kane muttered. Under his breath, he turned back to the map, tapping a location far beyond Earth's reach. "This is where we'll strike next." Preparations for the attack on the Nexus began immediately. Engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged ships while strategists planned every detail of the operation. The mission was codenamed Operation Eclipse, a bold attempt to infiltrate Imperial space, destroy the Nexus, and retreat before reinforcements arrived. Success depended on speed, stealth, and precision. Daniel and Lisa volunteered to join the Y mission, insisting that their knowledge of Imperial protocols and tactics made them invaluable assets. Arik too signed on, unwilling to sit on the sidelines after everything he had risked to help them escape. Together they formed a small but determined team, tasked with guiding the fleet through dangerous territory. As the day of the operation approached, tension mounted among the crew. Pilots ran simulations, soldiers checked their gear, and technicians double-checked every system. Families gathered at spaceports, bidding tearful farewells to loved ones heading into battle. Posters plastered on walls reminded everyone of what they were fighting for Earth, for freedom. On the morning of the launch, President Laura Hayes addressed the fleet via live broadcast. Her voice carried strength and resolve, cutting through the fear and uncertainty gripping everyone involved. "You are the best of us," she said, "the bravest, the brightest. Today, you carry the hopes of billions. Do your duty, and know that we stand with you." Her words ignited a fire within the ranks. Soldiers checked their weapons one last time. Pilots ran pre-flight checks, and engineers made final adjustments to their vessels. Families sent messages of love and encouragement, knowing full well that many might never return. Yet even in the face of death there was hope, a belief that their sacrifice would mean something. The journey to the Nexus was fraught with danger. Imperial patrols roamed the edges of their territory, scanning for intruders. The fleet moved, cautiously, sticking to less traveled routes and avoiding major trade lanes. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to their target, and closer to disaster. One night, as the fleet drifted silently through the void, Lisa sat alone, in the observation deck staring out at the stars. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. What if they failed? What if the Empire was ready for them? She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. They had come too far to turn back now. Daniel found her moments later, his footsteps soft against the metal floor. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently, taking a seat beside her. She shook her head. "I keep thinking about what happens if we don't make it," she admitted. "What happens if we lose?" "We can't think like that," Daniel replied firmly. "We have to believe we'll succeed. If we don't, then what's the point?" Lisa nodded, drawing strength from his words. "You're right," she said softly. "We've got this." When they finally reached the Nexus, the sight was breathtaking and terrifying. The structure loomed ahead, a massive fortress of steel and glass surrounded by layers of defenses. Fighters patrolled its perimeter, while larger ships stood ready to intercept any intruders. Breaking through would require perfect timing and absolute precision. The fleet split into two groups. One acted as a diversion, drawing enemy forces away from the Nexus while the other slipped past the outer defenses unnoticed. Daniel, Lisa, and Arik joined the infiltration team, guiding their ship toward a hidden docking bay. As they approached, alarms blared and lasers streaked through the darkness. "Hold steady," Daniel shouted, gripping the controls tightly. The ship shuddered under the impact of incoming fire, but he kept his focus, navigating through the chaos. Behind him, Lisa coordinated with the rest of the team, relaying instructions and adjusting strategies on the fly. Once inside, they disembarked quickly, moving through the labyrinthine corridors of the Nexus. Imperial troops scrambled to respond, but the invaders were faster, striking hard and fast before retreating deeper into the complex. Arik disabled security systems along the way, his expertise proving invaluable as they pushed closer to their objective. Finally, they reached the central control room. Lisa worked quickly, planting explosives at key points while Daniel and Arik held off waves of guards. Sweat dripped down her face as she set the timers, her hands trembling slightly. "Done," she said finally, stepping back. "Let's go." They barely made it out in time. The explosions tore through the Nexus, collapsing its core and sending shockwaves rippling outward. The entire structure began to crumble, its once mighty defenses reduced to rubble. As they fled, the fleet regrouped and prepared to jump back to safety. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread quickly. The destruction of the Nexus dealt a crippling blow to the Empire, leaving their forces scattered and disorganized. While the war wasn't over, humanity had proven it could fight back and win. President Hayes addressed the public once more, her voice filled with pride and gratitude. "Today, we honor those who gave everything to protect us," she said. "Their sacrifice will never be forgotten. And though the road ahead remains difficult, we stand united, with courage, with hope, and with the unwavering belief that together, we can build a better future." Daniel and Lisa watched the broadcast from the observation deck of the SS Solace, their hearts heavy but hopeful. They had played a part in humanity's triumph, however small, and yet they knew the galaxy remained a dangerous place. The Empire would recover and new threats would emerge. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. "Do you think we'll ever see a real end to all this?" Lisa asked softly. Gazing out at the stars, Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe not in our lifetime," he admitted. "But someday we'll get there." Somewhere in the depths of space, the Empire regrouped, licking its wounds and plotting revenge. The galaxy remained a dangerous place, but humanity had proven it wouldn't go quietly into the night. Whatever came next, they would face it together.